Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest installment of Drake Talks. Today, we're going to be focusing on the sports technology vertical, and Drake Star Partners and Northridge are delighted to be co-hosting this event. The key theme today is Beyond the Game, the new fan engagement model. A reminder that at the end of the panel, we'll be taking questions, so please do start thinking about some topics to discuss during the discussion. Next slide. Just a brief introduction. I'm Greg Bedrosian, the managing partner and CEO of Drake Star. I'm based in our firm's New York office, and outside of my day job as CEO of the firm, I'm also an active banker within our firm's sports tech practice. I'm also joined today by Eric Ward, a partner in our London office who also plays a senior role in our sports tech coverage. Additionally, John Walters and Tessa Hollingsworth are here today as our co-hosts with Northridge. They'll talk a little bit more about their firm and their participation a little bit later on in the event. Next slide. Just a few words about Drake Star before we get started for those who are a little bit less familiar with the firm. We're a dedicated technology-focused investment bank which advises firms on M&A and corporate finance matters worldwide. We bring 27 partners and over 100 investment banking professionals worldwide to our clients' needs and desires. We're proud to have completed well over 370 transactions since our firm's inception. In addition to our technology focus, we also have a strong global presence. We operate out of 9 offices across North America and Europe, and we also have partnerships in the Middle East and Asia to help extend our reach. So it's not a surprise that the vast majority of the deals and client situations we're involved in do have a cross-border element. We are proud as a firm to be consistently ranked in the league tables as one of the top 1 or 2 in our areas of focus, and have been honored to have received numerous Deal of the Year and Firm of the Year awards, most recently, and certainly proud on behalf of our team to have recently won the Cross-Border Investment Banking Firm of the Year award. We channel all that effort, reach, and sector expertise into our sports tech advisory practice. And we have 3 dedicated senior partners focused on sports tech, myself in New York, Eric Ward in London, and Michael Metzger, one of our partners based in our firm's Los Angeles office. We've closed 7 deals within the sector in the last few years, and certainly harness and bring all of our sector expertise and reach to our deals. So for those who would like to follow up after the webinar with any of us on the senior sports tech team, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'd love to start a dialogue. With that, I'd love to pass the baton to John to introduce Northridge and his role as a co-host in this event. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks very much, Greg, and welcome everyone, and thank you for joining this session. As Greg says, I'm John Walters, a partner at Northridge, and hopefully we've got a slide up there which tells you a little bit about who we are. Northridge is a specialist law firm, Europe's largest sports practice, and we're proud to be top ranked in both the leading legal directories for our sports practice, one of the only 2 firms that's recognised as such. So our reputation has been built on acting for blue chip endemic sports industry clients, be that sports teams, governing bodies, agencies, leisure brands, athletes, or investors. And that work spans M&A, investment, significant commercial deals, regulatory investigations, or litigation. But the reason for today's session and why we're excited to partner with Drake Star on this is that we've had a long-standing involvement in the burgeoning sports tech sector, if you can give it that broad brush label. So our story on that front and involvement dates back a number of years, where we acted for one of the front runners in GPS tracking technology, Stat Sports, in which we continue to have an advisory role on the board. And we also helped facilitate an investment by a consortium of high-profile football clients in video platform Grabio. And we've subsequently been able to curate a number of these types of deal. So born from that is Northridge Track, which is really quite a simple concept. It's a club which supports and connects growth businesses and industry participants who focus on applying technology in the sports and entertainment sector. And so underpinning it, and hopefully given his first-class legal advice, but its purpose is to help connect the dots between our client base and contact book, and to generate mutually beneficial conversations. We're very much looking forward to being joined by this esteemed panel. As Greg says, it really is first class. I'd like to pass my thanks on to them for joining us. And also I'd like to thank Ed Malyon for making the time to moderate the session. Ed is founder and MD of The Athletic UK. I'm sure most of you will be familiar with the first class content offered by The Athletic. And I think can genuinely say it set a new gold standard for sports journalism and proved a genuine revenue model for the delivery of digital news and reporting content. So without further ado, I'll pass on to Ed.
Thank you very much. Welcome everyone. As we did say earlier, there is the Q&A towards the end, and there is a free sub to The Athletic for everyone who has a question selected. I'm doing the selecting, so it's a little bit fixed in that turn, but yeah, here we go. So we've got a Q&A at the end. Please get in your questions as they come up throughout the webinar, because I think we'd love to hear from all the different people who are out there watching today. You're not here to talk or listen to me, you are here to hear from our great panel, so I'll introduce them one by one. First up, I'll go to Andrew Howard from Shamrock, who will just introduce himself and Shamrock Capital just for a moment. When he takes off mute.
There you go. Thanks, Ed, and appreciate it. And the folks at Drakestar Northridge for including and inviting me for this today. For those of you that don't know Shamrock, we're a private equity firm based in Los Angeles with just about $2 billion of capital under management, focused on media, entertainment, communications, sports, and related technologies underlying those sectors. We've been pretty big investors within the sports sector to date. Things like live entertainment, Harlem Globetrotters, Learfield Sports, which does collegiate advertising and marketing, to the likes of Pixelot, that does fully automated production and broadcast for live events, Mobility, that outfits Wi-Fi DAS solutions for arenas and facilities within the sports landscape, Appetize, that does point of sale for the stadiums and arenas, and then FanDuel, obviously many of you know, which is the gaming company focused on sports. So big believers, we do both minority and majority investments. Minimum investment would be around 20 million into a company, all the way up into several hundred million. But we see us as being strategic investors, backing our management teams as they're going through their inflection curve. So again, thank you for having me.
We also have with us co-founder and CEO of Wildmoka, Cristian Livadiotti. If you'd like to give us a brief intro, Cristian.
Sure. Thanks, Ed. And thanks, Drakestar and Northridge, for having me on this panel. So I'm Cristian, co-founder and CEO of Wildmoka. So Wildmoka is a company delivering a cloud platform for live video editing that our customers are using to cover premium live events. More specifically, they use the platform to create any form of video content, short form, long form, live, and distribute that to any digital endpoint. So of course, social media, but more and more importantly, their own OTT and D2C platform on web and mobile. We're strongly positioned on two different verticals, news and sports, and our platform has been built to bring the fastest turnaround on the market when it comes to deliver content to endpoints. And we know how much speed is key to these two sectors. In news, premium live events could mean, for example, the US elections, during which our customers, for example, NBC News, MSNBC, CNBC, Fox News, but also large number of stations and networks in the US and Europe, generated more than 1 billion views in a couple of days. In sports, we're working with major broadcasters such as NBC Sports, Fox Sports, ESPN, beIN globally. Of course, a lot of companies in France, since this is our hometown, so to speak. But more and more, we're also working with federation and leagues like LFP, French Ligue 1, CONCACAF, MLS, and so on. Our mission is to enable our customers to hyper-distribute their content. Hyper-distribute meaning being available and being present on all the touch points with their fans, so that they can ultimately, of course, monetize their audience and their content. In order to do that, we've built a lot of automation technologies on our platform, whether it is to create automatic highlights of sports game, or to transform live TV feed in 16:9 into a vertical feed, best feed for mobile. Very glad to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
I see, Cristian. We also have Rich Routman here, who's the president of Minute Media, which is a large portfolio. So, Rich, if you'd like to give us a brief introduction.
Great. I'll echo, thanks for having me. Very quickly, Minute Media has been around almost 10 years. Really, the business sits in two places. B2B technology company focused on internet content publishing. And the second area of the business is direct-to-consumer publishing brands. So we power a lot of mid to large size publishing businesses through our technology, serving hundreds of millions of fans across a number of different verticals of content every single month. And then on the direct to consumer side, it's largely been brands that we've either built from scratch or even recently over the last few years acquired, including the Players Tribune, Fan-Sided from Meredith. We've also have a global football brand that we've built from scratch in 90 Min, an esports brand in Double Tap. So we are across a sector and a variety of different content verticals. And we monetize through B2B SaaS, but also through advertising and have been doing so for a number of years. So that's Minute Media. Look forward to the chat.
Last but certainly not least, James Murray, the Chief of Staff at AC Milan. James, if you'd like to give a brief intro to you and the club, although I'm not sure the club needs too much introduction.
Sure. So thanks, Ed, and one final thanks to our host. Thanks for having us and for having me on. So I joined about AC Milan about 2 years ago, following the club's takeover by Elliott Management, as many of you know, a US-based hedge fund. It's certainly one of the giants of European football, but as those who follow football and the business of football will know, had a relatively difficult period on and off the pitch over recent years. So I came on board following a stint as head of strategy at Arsenal with our chief executive, Ivan Gazidis, as part of a new ownership and management team. And we've essentially been tasked with stabilizing the club's finances, but also re-energizing the brand and ultimately bringing the team back to competing at the top of European football, which means, looking at everything from the sports side, a new stadium project, and then also kind of reinvigorating our relationship with the fan base and making sure that we're tapping into our global audience. So spend a lot of time thinking about the types of themes I'm sure we'll cover today.
Yeah, and I might as well start the things off by asking you the first question, James, since I have you. I think the first real topic that we want to get stuck into is this idea of the connected fan. Now, this affects every single one of the companies we're talking about today, but football clubs have that particular, link with people where you have genuine supporters. And AC Milan is an interesting one because serving your fans in the Lombardia region of Italy is very different to serving your fans in Chicago or serving your fans in Indonesia, wherever they may be. So everyone talks about the rise of the connected fan, but how do you define that? What does it mean to you? And then how does AC Milan need to work differently with technology partners to serve that connected fan?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. I mean, how you define fandom is even a kind of concept which has been, I think, challenged significantly in the recent past, where somebody who is attending the stadium every single game, regularly buying your merchandise, versus someone who's getting up at 3 a.m. to watch your games in Indonesia. Who's to say which is a kind of a more engaged level of fandom? I think when we think about, in this context, we're talking about the connected fan. It's really all individuals who are at the center of this ecosystem, which is constantly evolving. So their platform and content promiscuous. Our fans and consumers don't really draw the same lines between devices, platforms, content as they used to. We think about it in terms of they're going to get the experiences that they want, and they're going to have the relationship that they want with you. You need to be where they are with all the experiences and information that they have at their fingertips. Our focus needs to be removing the barriers to the greatest extent possible, and making sure that we can speak to them in their own language and the context that they want. It's about so much more than just content, and definitely so much more than just the match day.
And when you're looking at fans around the world, they're being engaged by now like media organizations. They're being engaged by clubs who in themselves are often media organizations, as well as the leagues themselves. So maybe a good time to bring in Rich on this one. You have a wide portfolio of different brands that you work with, but all of them are really, or most of them are trying to engage fans and sports fans and followers of sport. So how do you think that's evolving with the new era of connectivity among fans?
Well, it's definitely different at the market level, as you mentioned to James. I mean, engaging with a fan in Brazil and engaging a fan in the UK or the US are two totally different strategies to employ, actually, from our perspective. But I think through content, if we're thinking about it specifically through a content experience, I think for us, the strategy has really been to surround the fan. Right? And I think that's, when you think about our acquisition of the Players Tribune, that was another angle of content that we think fans are really interested in. So whether you're looking to hear from a fan journalist, whether you're looking to hear from a polished journalist, whether you're looking to hear from one of your sports idols, as much as it is about the connected fan of the different technologies that you're utilizing to access that information, it's also about being able to bring a differentiated point of view. So for us, it's really about, no matter what sector of the market you're looking to, outside the live stream, because we're not spending billions of dollars on broadcast rights, we think that we could, through one of our brands, offer a unique tone and voice that makes sense, and maybe even a subject matter that we can cover from multiple different angles. And anything we can do to enhance that with our technology, even better. So for us, it's really about the diversification of our technology across those different content opportunities, whether it's on an individual platform like audio, whether it's traditional digital publishing, or what we're doing in video as well. But it's aligning the message with the person who should be delivering that message, whether it's your idol or one of your friends.
Interesting. So, I think that you mentioned that. I don't think any of us here are rights holders in any significant way in terms of big broadcast rights, which cost billions and billions to buy. But we do have Cristian on the line, who obviously with Wildmoka, what your whole game is it's a platform for video production and the hyper distribution that you're talking about and monetization. And this is something that, that all the leagues that we watch, certainly all the leagues we watch are looking to get their video out to fans as soon as possible. They want to see highlights, they want to see action, they want to see sometimes just the funny clips, that are emerging from every game. So how do you think this will continue to evolve? There's going to be artificial intelligence coming in, machine learning that can help improve these technologies. And what do you think the kind of next steps are in this realm?
Yeah, indeed. The connected fan is, in our market or in our business, is our bread and butter, right? As Rich was saying, the strategy for our customers as well, broadcasters, is to surround the fan. And surrounding the fan with content means basically being present on all the touch points with the fan that there could be. And the connected fan itself, for us, actually is not a specific demographic or is not a specific age. Everybody can be a connected fan, and it really comes down to the situation. So we worked with a couple of our customers on the connected fan journey, and how, depending on the situation you're in, you potentially want to consume the content differently. If you're at home, potentially you would watch the live event on your big TVs, certainly. But if you're at work, then watching the live stream on your desktop computer can make sense. If you're commuting back home, then watching highlights of things you missed during work could make sense, or even having them pushed to you through mobile. So basically, the purpose is really to provide content in the right format to the right platform, so that you can actually be where the fan expects to see the content at any given time. And of course, in order to do that efficiently, you need to bring a lot of technologies to the rights holder or owner, so that the content can be produced without multiplying the teams by 10. So hence the artificial intelligence, yes.
And what's been the impact of the vertical screen on the broadcasting industry in your mind?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think that the first step was definitely for our customers to understand that they need to be there, meaning they need to provide content to all those platforms with a very defined content strategy, keeping the premium content on their platform where they can make money, and pushing highlights, for example, on social media as a mean to recruit audience. But the second level is to understand that depending on the platform, the format of the content can be different. We're talking short form versus long form versus live. But you're right, vertical content versus square versus horizontal content makes sense depending on the platform you target. But one step ahead, even the narrative has to be adapted to the platform. You don't tell the same story. You don't tell it the same way on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat. One of our customers have deployed a very extensive digital strategy to cover events such as Roland Garros and Tour de France, where they keep the premium live content to their OTT digital platform, desktop, mobile, but they are using extensively social media, but differently depending on the platform. So Facebook and Twitter would be single action clips, short form, YouTube 20-minute summaries, and Snapchat, Instagram could be shoulder content, fun facts, stories around athletes, and so on. So obviously this requires a lot of work and a very detailed editorial strategy. And in order to deliver it, you need artificial intelligence. Regarding the verticalized content, we launched this year a product called Rezone, which can automatically transform a horizontal layout made for TV into a vertical layout. We call that responsive video, meaning that it will adapt automatically following our customer's editorial requirement to the screen that you're targeting.
Okay, and I know Andy, Shamrock have some investment in the same sort of area with Pixelot. So I was wondering what you look for in terms of, like you're worried about the infrastructure going forward. When these businesses are building out, do we have the things in place to connect to the fans in the way that we want to at this point?
Great question, Ed. And I think we look at it from a couple different perspectives. Obviously, we're in a pandemic world, and then what does it look like post-pandemic? But you have to also think about 24, 36 months from now. With Pixelot in particular, what they're doing for people's information is they do automated production quality, enable you to broadcast of live events. So they have a camera system that captures half a field and the other half a field. And the secret sauce is the stitching together, fully automated, being able to track what's going on the field of play. So whether it is football or soccer or basketball or volleyball, or 10 other sports, you're able to do it in a fully automated environment and to real time distribute and broadcast it. Obviously, in a pandemic world where no one's at a game or no one's able to travel to watch a practice field or a development field, having these systems in place is really crucial so you can see what's going on. And that's where we saw the relationships that we've developed at Pixelot with FC Barcelona and Sociedad and Real Madrid, where they're able to actually capture things in this environment and bring it to the hub. But then they're also, for like FC Barca, they're able to then use that information, that trove, that library for Barca TV Plus. So you're seeing people able to get that content and then be able to distribute it to their fans, and then later on be able to monetize it. But we're also, as it pertains to the infrastructure, very focused on what's life like post-pandemic, because we all want to get back into the stadium. I think we're going to see a massive rush for people wanting to buy tickets to go capture the things that they've missed during this past year. So companies like Mobility, where we're outfitting the stadiums and arenas and facilities with the wireless infrastructure, because prior to, you probably were not able not only to send a picture, but even write a text or make a phone call. Now we want that capability to be had. And then you have the benefits there of companies like FanDuel, where you can do gaming within the arena and the stadium and do it in a real-time basis. Without that infrastructure there, it's not feasible. And then we have a company called Appetize, where they do the point of sale at the stadiums and arenas. You're going to see a transformation taking place on how you order and how food get delivered because of contact. So the ability to order your food or merchandise via your phone, it alerts you when your food's ready so you can go pick it up so you're not waiting in line, or you're doing contactless ordering at the concession stand, and things are either getting delivered to you or you're notified when to pick it up. So we're very focused on what's going on with the connected fan at home, so they stay engaged with their team or their player that they're a big proponent of, or when they eventually get back into the stadium and arena, can have that experience where they feel not only safe, but they're back to being fully engaged.
And we're talking about how the fans are connected now, and there's a younger, more engaged generation, I think, driven by experiences. And I know this as we have a direct-to-consumer business, of course, and I feel like there's more demand now for a direct-to-consumer relationship between brands. Rich, I want to kind of talk about your portfolio, as it were. How do you kind of see the differing demands on media brands from consumers themselves as kind of people get more used to, more accustomed to having a DTC model?
I think for each of our brands, it needs something different. So, with Players Tribune, it's traditionally been a long form content business. It's been about storytelling from athletes. There's natural extensions to that business through digital audio and through OTT. Right? You would never take what Fansided does and build an OTT business on the back of it. It just simply wouldn't make sense. So for each of our brands, I would say a different distribution philosophy probably makes a lot of sense. And ultimately those extensions, whether through short form, audio, video, or otherwise, kind of play a key role with our content leadership, right? It's where their consumers, what we're really careful about, I guess, with our business, and what I've been careful about in previous kind of global publishing business, is that it's not a one size fits all model. Whatever works in the US, you can't expect to work in another market, and what works for your distribution deal with Yahoo in the US doesn't necessarily work in Japan with Sports Navi. So I think that for us, it's really looking at the individual content brands and where the opportunities are for growth for each of them. For instance, in esports, it's entirely different. One of our best distribution platforms for our esports content is not Facebook or even Twitch, it's Reddit, right? Because that's where the esports conversation is happening, right? And so I think if you want to be in the live stream business, clearly you should be on Twitch, and we have to engage audiences there. But it's finding those opportunities to pull users out and into our experience. And each one of those brands should have their own specific strategy. So we just have to be really nimble and make sure we can pivot to those places when necessary.
Just a reminder for people to get their questions in. We have 2 so far, and there's a free sub for The Athletic to everyone who gets a question in. I'm just going to flip it over to James on the same subject. We're seeing lots of sports leagues and federations. The one that springs to my mind is NFL Game Pass, but I think we're going to see this more with European football leagues trying to drive their own OTT platform, and Manchester United TV and all the different football clubs. We heard about Barca TV Plus. Do we think this is a sustainable direct-to-consumer strategy for brands like football clubs, big sports teams? And there are partnerships now. We're seeing AC Milan, I believe, with Rock Nation, also one with Twitch. What's the future of this in your mind, looking at it from AC Milan's perspective?
Well, I think in terms of the development of in-house OTT capability particularly for leagues and federations as rights holders, but also for clubs, they have kind of different sets of agendas and objectives. The 2 overriding motivations really, one is more data, more information through that direct relationship with your end consumers. Obviously that opens up direct and indirect monetization opportunities. But I think there's also the sort of future proofing of the business model, basically reducing reliance on traditional broadcast and enabling you effectively to generate competition within your own market and extract value where perhaps the traditional broadcasters wouldn't be able to reach it through a kind of B2B2C model. But I think what sits at the core of this is fans being very specific about what they want. They're starting to unbundle from these sort of heavy cable style sports offers. They want more on demand content. They're very value conscious. So I think that really what we're seeing with the development of OTT is each whether it's a niche sport or whether it's a football club with a significant following, are seeing the opportunity to provide exactly the content that their fans want, learn significantly more about them, and be able to offer that kind of knowledge and insight to sponsors. as well as being able to generate, in the short term, some revenue. So I think that, it is a sustainable business model, but it's not just about that kind of direct monetization of the fan base. I think it's really about, trying to make yourself a bigger part of the fans' consumption and a bigger part of the ecosystem in which they consume the content about their sport and their club, without relying entirely on the social media platforms and traditional broadcasters. So I do think that there's a kind of coexistence, and I think that it will continue to evolve as the traditional broadcast model becomes challenged. But I do think that especially for leagues and federations, there's a good reason why there's a significant focus on in-house OTT, because I think it's a real kind of future-proofing of the model.
Andy, you mentioned Barcelona earlier on. How do you feel the direction of travel is going with clubs and federations and leagues having their own OTT platforms, and what do we think that this broadcast universe is going to look like in 10 or 20 years?
Yeah, I think, listen, all the clubs and the governing bodies, everybody's looking at costs, their bottom line, particularly in what's going on with that pandemic, and how are they going to survive, or how do they make the most of their dollars. And so we're seeing, obviously, an evolution in business models, making certain that they can, whether they can go to a leasing or a revenue share model to deploy some of the technologies that are taking place, because they need to deploy some of the latest technology for fan engagement and to improve their distribution, because it is a global enterprise. So I see what, things like we're doing at Pixelot is being creative with the business models to enable, folks to be able to deploy the technologies in a readily fashion, particularly when they may not be having fans today. So we're seeing an evolution of models and obviously taking advantage of what's going on.
And when I think about these kind of direct-to-consumer relationships that are building across lots of different media organizations, what it means is that we have more data on customers, we have more data on fans, we have more data than ever. And it's up to us how we use these analytics. At The Athletic, we don't have a tremendous amount of data in particular on our readers. We have a name and an email address, but we do have the data of what they read, when they read it, how they read it. And this helps inform our content strategy and as well kind of how we run the general business. Each of you, I imagine, has different applications for the data that you have. So I'll start with you, Cristian. How are you guys using data and analytics to refine your strategy?
So actually data and analytics are offered to our customers so that they can refine their own content strategy. We do have that feature built in the platform, meaning whenever they distribute content, they have a collated view on the performance of the content, but also on the volume of content produced and so on. They can follow up on what the team does. And when we work with a given customer, there can be up to 100, 200, 500 editors using the platform daily to create content. So it's massive. The analytics they use in order to refine the content strategy. Some of them are using more advanced platforms such as Sprinkler, Hootsuite, Tabular, and so on, so that they can go one step beyond and elaborate a strategy that will be similar to what I described, like a very elaborated social media diversified strategy, so that they can address all demographics, all situations, and so on. In the future, I guess, one thing we're discussing with our customers is feedback loop, meaning how much they can reuse analytics in order to refine in real time their content distribution process, or even things around A/B testing of content, testing different versions of title, thumbnail, or even different versions of the content itself to see what's performing better.
And I think, Rich, with the companies that you're working with, you have better insights, you have better data kind of around your customers, but there's the balance of using that to drive revenue versus further engagement with those audience and with new audiences. So like, how do you strike that balance?
Yeah, I think there's data that benefits us and there's data that benefits our partners. And it's about giving each of those groups access to the same data. I think that's really the most important part, is that data can't sit in a black box, and you have to make the data addressable and beneficial to everybody. But I will say, going back to a point that Andy and James were making, for us, and, certainly we're not a company with endless resources, although we do employ almost 500 people. It's standing up a channel is not difficult anymore. If you're a content brand and you want to have a channel on a platform, whether it's an OTT or otherwise, you can do it probably in the next 2 weeks. I think it's about, digital, at least in my view, is about the bets you choose not to make. And, so for us, there's a lot of different opportunities to chase down fans, and there's tons of different verticals. It's which ones are we going to put our real muscle behind? Which one are we going to put real marketing resources behind? Are we going to develop this ourselves, or are we going to use a third party? Do we believe that this as a long-term solution, or are we trying to chase something down that's a buzzword that everybody's talking about in boardrooms? I think that's a big part of how we look at these things now, is through the lens of what's the long-term value of this user and how we can extract that, not just in the short term, but on a long-term basis, which is why I agree with James, is that, it's not just the fan in the stadium anymore. It's, the fan and how do we make those content experiences different? I don't want the same experience from the NFL on an OTT platform as I get from a Sunday broadcast. It better be different or I'm not going to tune in, right? And that's why I think Red Zone is brilliant. Right? So I think that's really the lens that we have to look at these things through. And we may choose not to do all of them, and that's okay, because the ones that we're going to choose to do, we're going to go long on. And so that's generally been our philosophy when it comes to looking at these opportunities.
We've got so many questions that I'm actually going to go to the Q&A a little bit early, but I will just get a last couple of questions in around investor appetite. Andy, teams and federations are increasingly becoming independent investment vehicles. Why is this trend emerging?
One, because they have, to your point before, great data. But data is only as good as you can make it useful. And so they're definitely at the front end of this data. And so they're trying to figure out how do they invest behind it. So we're continually looking and working with many of the leagues and governing bodies to invest. We see them as strategic partners, which we've done in many of our investments, and we continue to see them investing for the long term.
And what metrics are investors looking for, do you think?
Well, always a return on your money. But, from our standpoint, you can have a great business and a great business model, but if you don't have the right management team, you don't have anything. So we're constantly, while we're challenging and pressing the assumptions of the business models, what we've learned from the pandemic is you need to have a management team that can maneuver and shuck and jive and understand how to be flexible, and also to be willing to go that extra mile, because your reputation at the end of the day is the most important. So we're very focused on the management teams, complete management teams, or things that maybe we can help them supplement to enhance, but that's fundamental.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the Q&A now. I will try and select the person who I think is the best equipped to answer. If you believe that you could come up with another answer, then please kind of give me some sort of visual indication and I'll make sure that happens. So let's pick one first from Toby Hill. To what extent are traditionally popular sports looking to esports for inspiration with regard to engaging untapped audiences and the younger generations? So I think Rich will have something to say on this, but James, I'm sure AC Milan are learning stuff from esports as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in first, and James, please carry on. Esports is not new. If you're just getting into esports now, you may already be too far behind, right? So, from it's our perspective that, and by all means, I mean, I spent years at the NFL and in college sports. I am definitely not your consumer when it comes to esports. My kids are probably more so than me. So I had to learn everything from scratch. So we were looking at our investment in esports, almost 5 years ago. We knew we needed to be there. We just weren't sure how to get there, and what we needed to do differently in order to get to that base of potential users that perhaps was untapped to us. So I think the way that we looked at it, Ed, was specifically through the lens of 90 Min, our football brand, is what are these fans doing when they're not consuming football? And the reality is that a large percentage of our users, given the data we had, were playing video games of different forms or functions. So it was a natural extension to what we're doing. I'm not so sure that it makes sense for every single club to have an esports team. I think the math actually proves that out. You know, a lot of the teams that have gotten into esports have done so unsuccessfully. So I think that it's really about, are you addressing a future opportunity rather than trying to check a box? And I think a lot of the companies that have come into esports looking to check a box have failed miserably. And the guys that have deployed a real strategy there that has made sense are the ones that are seeing the fruits of that.
Yeah, I would actually just, I completely agree with all of that. You know, at Arsenal, we looked long and hard at the sector and decided not to make an investment. Whereas at AC Milan, we have actually teamed up with one of the leading esports teams, Clash, which has a sort of multi-game approach. But, you know, what we used to talk about at Arsenal is we want to avoid dad dancing. We don't want to be the guys that are sort of clumsily entering the dance floor and kind of making ourselves kind of look stupid and not resonating with the audience. And there is the genuine risk of that. You know, you really have credibility is absolutely fundamental. And, you know, and entering into these, as Rich rightly says, entering into this space without a proper strategy and without that credibility and without a very clear idea of what your objectives are, you're more likely to do damage to your brand rather than enhance it. And actually, a lot of those audiences that you were looking to kind of reach, engage, and then somehow convert into consumers or converts to your brand, you're likely to have the opposite effect. And so, you know, it is a real case of approaching these kinds of things, you know, particularly when they're so hot and it's something that it's something that people are all talking about. You've got to approach them with caution and approach them with strategy and approach them with commitment when you decide to go.
Interesting thing that Rich said that I'd just like to throw to Andy if I could. What do you do when there is a booming sector that you clearly want to invest in, but you're not quite sure how to do it?
It's a great question. I mean, a lot of it is a little earlier stage for us. It's a venture world, and you've got to see some of these businesses mature to be able to, for our appetite, be able to make an investment. But they're growing. I mean, esports is obviously that. I mean, it's massive, and you see the engagement and the data behind it. It's extraordinary. So we're constantly. I mean, we look at 400 to 500 opportunities, investments a year. We make 2 to 5 investments. So it's like getting your kids into preschool in Los Angeles. It's tough. We get it, but you know, you're gonna have to, you know, you can kiss a lot of frogs. You're really gonna have to spend some time looking at the business models, seeing how they're evolving, and to be able to look at that trend data. Otherwise, you have to understand you're making a venture capital, an early stage risk investment. It could have high rewards at the end of the day, but you could also lose your money. Again, I go back to the management team. They've got to be able to be flexible and have been to the rodeo before and understand how to maneuver because they're going to get a lot of things thrown at them.
Yeah, and I think that use of capital, even outside of the investor field, is really important to us as a business now. You know, so if you would ask me 5 years ago, you know, we'd be looking at an investment opportunity that could yield an extra $5 or $10 million in revenue. Those are not things you know, if this isn't a 25 or 50 or potentially $100 million opportunity, you know, we're probably not interested in investing unless it really complements other things that we're doing now. So even as a much smaller company, I guess we would venture invest into our own ideas. As a much bigger company, you have to be really careful on the ones you choose to go for.
And it's why a lot of the bigger companies can't be as innovative. I mean, it's why you see a lot of, you know, the garage outfit companies being able to start is because they're taking that risk and they believe in that and then they can fly. The larger companies making a $2 to $4 million investment to get, you know, to see $5 to $10 million in return doesn't move a needle, and they cannot innovate like some of the smaller brethren.
There's a question in the chat from Pip Halett, which is positively screaming your name, Cristian. Implementing the back-end systems to personalize content for connected fans can be costly and works well for the bigger sports rights holders. But what approach would you suggest for smaller rights holders with smaller budgets? And where would you focus your initial efforts and budget? What are the cheaper, quick wins?
That's a good question. And it contains actually several questions in one, I would say. So first, on the personalization aspects, I do believe that entering this era of automation with artificial intelligence will allow at some point to reach a level where we personalize the content. This is the ultimate goal. It has been the goal for years. It is not yet mainstream, even with big brands, because you have to cross, I guess, the automation of the content creation with data you get from the audience, and also because it is most of the time not on par with rights contracts. When looking at smaller sports, actually, I think that our kind of platform, meaning cloud, allows, let's say, an easier startup because you don't have a lot of investments to make in order to get started. You can, as Rich was saying, build a channel quite easily nowadays using cloud technologies. So getting started and putting things around to be able to broadcast is today a lot easier than it used to be, which is a huge change in order to get niche content out across fans. But I believe that ultimately we shouldn't undervalue the role and the mission of media companies. We call them broadcasters, and we think that this needs to be evolved, or we need to find an alternative to broadcasters. But for me, those guys are the storytellers, and broadcasters will evolve in this digital era to media companies. Their expertise is to build stories around events. So it can be sports, it can be news, it can be anything. But this is where, this is where I think we shouldn't undervalue the value of those guys. So I don't know if I really addressed the core of the question. I'm trying to find it in the chat so that I can read it. Who was the person asking the question? Ed?
I'll find it, 1 second. I think it's implementing the back-end system to personalize content for connected fans can be costly and works well for the bigger rights holders, but what are the cheaper quick wins for smaller rights holders?
Yeah, well, I think that personalizing content is not yet mainstream. We do a lot of targeting today, targeting by branches of demographics and so on, but personalization is not yet mainstream. And I think the main limit today is not technology, is not even cost, it's rights.
We know that one all too well. All of these questions for the next 6 minutes, we're going to have short, concise answers, so I can get through about 5 or 6 of them. Brian Sokolow, you are first up. What are the most effective strategies for reaching millennials? What level of customization is necessary? James, I'll go to you. I'm sure you're trying to attract a lot of millennials in Milan.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, the first thing I would say is that we don't tend to use kind of broad brush terms like millennials, because that makes a lot of assumptions about, a kind of homogenized group of people that you can just approach in a particular way based on, in this case, their age. So, we try to, as we've talked a lot about the differences between fans across geographies. We've talked about kind of levels of fandom in terms of the platforms and that they engage with the club through, the types of content that they consume. So when we're looking at our fans, we try to build up slightly kind of richer profiles. There's data everywhere to be able to do this. So you think about transactional data for those fans who are, in our ecosystem and consuming our content, even more detailed around those that are in our stadium environment. You've got stuff which you can get from social media content and the like, more demographic information which you can overlay, first party survey data. So when we talk about addressing particular segments of fans, we try to build out slightly richer personas and think about what type of content, offer, sponsor, what kind of package could we create that will really kind of resonate, and then start to think about the content and the context. So which platform, when should they be seeing it, how will they interact with it? So an idea of how do you get younger audience to focus on you, or how do you attract millennials? We try to kind of think one layer deeper than that. So who are we really trying to target? Which geography, which type of fan, and try to develop something which is a little bit more bespoke. And certainly people, consumers in general, are expecting a higher level of personalization, and that is a trend amongst the younger audience, perhaps to a greater extent. So there is a certain amount of that, making sure that we're targeting people. We talk about reaching globally and engaging personally, and that's really what it's all about. We really want to make sure that people are able to have the relationship with AC Milan that they want on their terms. We just need to be there.
Very good answer, spoken like a true millennial. How valuable do you think user-generated content is within fan engagement, Rich?
I think, again, a question that I would have answered differently years ago than I'd answer today. I think that there's a lot of fans that want to get their voice out there. And I think that as a platform business, I think it's really important for us to enable that connection because, Andy's friend may have a really interesting point of view on his team that, has not been shared before by some of the mainstream broadcasters and their professional talent. So I think it is really interesting in terms of surfacing another point of view, in terms of how you curate it, how you, distribute it, and ultimately how you, present it to consumers and make sure that it still maintains that kind of unfiltered passion, but it still has been moderated to a certain extent, so you're putting out professional content that speaks volumes to your brand. Yes, I do think it's valuable, but I think you have to have a platform that addresses how you need to distribute it in order to do it the right way. So I think fan content is always going to be interesting. I think people want to hear from their friends, and that's why we go to bars, right? Is to sit with our friends and debate topics that you can sit there for hours about. And I think bringing that to life through technology is really important, but I think it's just doing it the right way and professionalizing the approach that, makes it a little bit, is some of the secret sauce.
Final question is from James Burrow, and I think, Andy, this one's screaming your name. Do you foresee any M&A activity whereby pure play sports OTT platforms begin acquiring downstream digital media platforms, for example, Dugout, to provide fans with a fully integrated end-to-end content platform?
No doubt. You really see people trying to think about the value chain, and at the end of the day, what are they missing that they need to have part of their complete solution? So yes, I think people are very focused on enterprise value. How do you really create something at the end of the day that has true value versus just a myopic quick win? So I do see companies going downstream as well as upstream. Some people really wanted to go for it, and you're going to have some mergers taking place that people are probably not suspecting.
Right, we might have time for one more very quick question then. Daniel Parr says, COVID has forced right holders to re-engineer their fan engagement strategies in light of lockdowns and empty stadia. The pandemic has also fundamentally changed the relationship between rights holders and major commercial partners and broadcasters forever. What innovations in fan engagement brought about by the pandemic do you think will remain once we're through the pandemic? And anyone can put their hand up for this one. James has got.
I'll start on that one because I think one of the phrases which we've used a few times recently is you only see who's naked when the tide goes out, and the pandemic, I think from my perspective, has not fundamentally changed an awful lot in terms of how we have to engage with fans and with sponsors. If anything, it's just really accelerated a lot of the trends that we were already seeing. I think those who are still over reliant on traditional kind of advertising board and match day inventory and weren't thinking enough about their digital experiences. Similarly with fans, those who weren't thinking in a more diverse way around their content streams, how to engage fans on non-match days and kind of in quiet periods in the season, effectively are the ones who have been most exposed to the impact of the pandemic. So I think that ultimately, forward-thinking rights holders and sports organizations have been doing these things in recent years to a greater or lesser extent. And I really just think that actually COVID hasn't fundamentally changed the business model or the engagement model for sponsors and fans. Really, it's just accelerated trends which were already there.
Yeah, and the one thing I would add to that, James, is that what the pandemic has created as a business owner is focus. And I think that there's a lot of things that we could be doing. There's a lot of things that we probably should have been doing this year in terms of new initiatives and new opportunities when the year started. What the pandemic has really forced us to be is better business operators. And I think that, you know, if your business can make money in 2020, you have a good business. And because, and you know, probably some of the decisions that you were thinking about making before the year started weren't the best ones anyway. So the focus that the pandemic has brought to the business is probably, at the end of the day, it's forced a lot of us to just look at everything differently, and as a result, probably come out of this a lot stronger than we even were imagining before.
Really excellent final point from Rich there. I just want to thank the panel, Cristian, Rich, Andy, James. Thank you for taking time out of your day to do this for us. Thank you to Greg and Eric from Drakestar for putting this whole thing on. John and Tessa from Northridge, as well as Mathilde, who was working behind the scenes to make all of this thing work. So just like to thank you all for joining. I'm so sorry we didn't get to all of your questions. It would have been terrific to carry on for another half an hour and do them all, but I'm sure lots of you have places to be getting to. So thanks once again for all the panelists for joining, and Northridge and Drakestar for hosting today's event.
Thank you.
Thank you.